Good morning, happy Mother's Day, good afternoon, like, subscribe, share, uh, send it somewhere, do anything. Not legal advice, KNOT. Uh, n- Today, I'm calling this Notes on a Courthouse. And when I was growing up, there was a newspaper called the Herald Examiner. They had a wonderful sports section. There was a column called Notes on the Scorecard, and it would be just a list of random thoughts of the day about sports, and I loved it. So this is in honor of that. For some reason, people seem to be interested in legal related proceedings. So before I get into the arbitration proceedings, which I am going to starting tomorrow, I kind of wanted to briefly touch on a bunch of events or proceedings that came out in my head. Free association, it was the first things that popped out. So not the only things, but was the first things that popped out. So went with it, and I'm gonna kind of go over the list. Something different. But before I do that, I wanted to give you today's joke. Um, and I was gonna tell you a joke about time travel, but you guys just didn't like it. Credit to that goes to Eddie Murphy's cousin. Hope you enjoyed that one. So, I'm going to touch on a bunch of events that I've experienced in my legal life, at least as I sat here and wrote out the first 15 things that came to my head. But I thought these were kind of all interesting, and some of you might find some of them interesting or not. One, the bar exam. So it was at a hotel in LA. There was about 2 or 3 thousand people. You had to bring like multiple IDs, and they checked your IDs, etc. When I took the bar exam in California, it was 3 days long. It was pretty grueling. When I was done, I was pretty tired, to be honest. Um, Friends of mine told me that if you went into the bathroom, and I didn't spend a lot of time in the bathroom, that there were people doing speed in the bathroom just to try to stay awake and alert. But the story that kind of floored me at the time was through a friend of mine, and who's now deceased, unfortunately, and his sister, who I'd met and I knew. She, ironically, along with her husband, worked for the SEC in Texas. They wanted to move back to California, so they needed to pass the California bar exam, both of them. She was brilliant, and she passed the California bar exam with something like the fifth highest score amongst many thousands of test takers. He could not pass the exam. I think he was a bright guy, but just was having a tough time passing the exam. So, because they were going to lose their jobs at the SEC, but not with apparently their knowledge, on the third occasion, while she was pregnant, in a disguise, suffering from diabetes induced by pregnancy, wearing a fake mustache, she took the bar exam for him. He, she passed with the eighth highest mark on the exam, despite being sick during most of the exam and vomiting and going to the bathroom, etc. Um, Eventually, because of the discrepancy in his scores, in other words, he had failed and then now he got the eighth highest score, it ended up being discovered. He never was able to practice. She was suspended but readmitted, attributing, the situation to the stress of her husband not being able to work, etc. But I found that really amazing that she was able to do that while sick and pregnant, and she was unable to not do the top of the food chain. So that was an interesting thing. That would have been like 1983, 1984. First court appearance, I did a previous video on this. I was embarrassed beyond belief. I had an uncontrollable Middle Eastern client. I had no idea what I was doing. The judge didn't help me by calling me out in front of like 100 other attorneys and telling me to get my hands out of my pants. Never forget that. Shaped me forever. Three, participating in a personal injury trial. I was just watching and monitoring, in essence, where the plaintiff, who had a slam dunk case, cost herself 7 figures about 30 years ago because of her shoes, the clickety clack of her shoes as she walked from the back of the courtroom. And the jury lost. She lost credibility with the jury, despite the obvious liability and damages. I call that the clickety clack. Four, during the O.J. Simpson trial period, in unrelated cases, just for fun, I would ask witnesses during depositions one or two questions about their knowledge about certain witnesses that were referenced in the O.J. trial. So I would ask if they knew Cato Kalin, for example. And it created a lot of fun. The other attorneys got the point, and it was fun. And I tried to do it several times because everybody was watching the trial, so everybody knew the characters. Sometimes the witnesses didn't get it, but the attorneys had fun. That when I started practicing in LA, so that would have been the early 80s, that it would take, and this is hard to believe, but this was true, it would take 5+ years to get any case to trial. And there was a statute that said if you didn't get it to 5 years, but you get to trial within 5 years, that the case would be dismissed. Sometimes the parties would stipulate to that, but it was literally 5 years. So if you filed a case today, you wouldn't get to court for 5 years. That's been substantially improved, but it took quite some time, and it was amazing. There was a department at the LA courthouse. You would go in, they would set trials. One of the judges would be a complete PRIC, you complete the word, and one was a sweetheart. And you wouldn't know who was there until they put the nameplate up in the department. And I remember, they would put up the nameplate late. And depending on whose nameplate went up, you'd hear either a groan or a, ah. It was very funny. And that particular courtroom would set all these 5-year cases. That's how that applied. Taking clients from the firm I was working with in 1984 to the Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, seeing Carl Lewis run, being told very late that I was taking clients at the last minute, and having to literally clean out my entire car prior to schlepping the clients to the Coliseum. And I remember it was I worked up quite a sweat doing that, and having clients that I'd never met, taking them to an event and spending a whole day with them. But the Olympics were cool. Intervening for a friend, this is number 7, intervening for a friend who's going to be targeted by a television show like 60 Minutes at the time, with if his name was going to be mentioned, and that was going to really interfere or terminate his career. And I was able to get the network not to mention his name or identify him. And that really ended up being important to him, and I was really happy that worked out. And it was a complete bluff on my part. I think it was NBC. It was either NBC or ABC, I don't remember, but it was a complete bluff, but it worked. Handling a case involving trade secrets, purporting to involve the creation of baseball. So the other side in this case, it was an attorney. He claimed to have invented this electronic baseball game. He'd also been convicted of a felony for some type of investment fraud. So he was bringing that claim. And while we were handling this case during the proceedings, there was a settlement conference, and a judge heard that he had been contacting other investors. And because that was seemingly could be a violation of his prior probation, during our case in this settlement conference, the judge orders a probation revocation proceeding against this guy who claimed to have invented electronic baseball. That stood out. 9, a jury trial that TV wanted to broadcast that involved a real estate dispute between a man and a woman that evolved into a slander trial and accusations of rape. I remember that case because it was just had a lot of funny moments too, surprisingly. But the jury was focused on those proceedings like hawks. They really found that to be captivating. And a lot of the moments, again, were very funny. Everybody in the courtroom at times was laughing, including the judge. 10, my surprise when a defendant in a breach of contract suit signed the judge's name to an order. So he literally, what he did is he took an order of the court, and as opposed to having the judge sign it, he signed it. He, of course, altered the order, delivered it to a bank, and took out thousands of dollars in funds. And I remember going to the courtroom for a hearing, and the sheriff's department being there to greet him. Uh, Representing but never meeting a singer George Michael. So I represented him on a dispute at some point in time, but I never even met him. 12, assisting hundreds of homeowners post the 2008 financial crash and permitting many of them to retain their homes despite dire financial circumstances. And I found that really satisfying. I have particular expertise in real estate, so I was able to do a lot, and that was really satisfying. Um, oh, representing a CPA in a civil case, and during the case, when he was being deposed, he had to take the Fifth Amendment, which was unusual in the civil case, because it turned out that he had testified in a civil case as an expert, and it was a family law, so it was a dissolution of marriage. It was a dispute, and it was a valuation of some asset that was a big valued asset, and they asked him for his background and college, and he gave the wrong college. He said something like Harvard, but he didn't go to Harvard. And then when the decision came out, the court really relied upon his opinion, and then it came out later that he didn't go to Harvard, and he explained he had forgotten or something, and that was just like an oddball situation. 14, seeing a member of Bruce Springsteen's E Street band who I knew waiting or walking the LA courthouse. I remember seeing him there and going over and saying hello. And 15, and this is just off the top of my head, my one Perry Mason trial moment, or the one I remember, was in a partnership dissolution proceeding involving CPAs. And I remember questioning the defendant, the other partner, and I made him look so bad that I felt bad for him, even though he was on the other side. And I felt embarrassed for his wife that was sitting in the peanut gallery. And that was my one Perry Mason moment. Perry Mason was the attorney. There was a show a long time ago. He was a lawyer, and he would get everybody to admit on the stand. They'd acknowledge doing whatever. Doesn't happen very often. Anyway, those like 15 things come off the top of my head. Give you a little background on me. I will be discussing arbitration next week, probably starting Monday. Be well. Happy Mother's Day to everyone who celebrates. Take care. Talk to you later.